Having not served on the committee, I'm going to turn this over to Tom to give a brief explanation of what this is about. You can see if you've got a copy of the agenda, the change is on the agenda.
Right, so,
Anybody need a copy of the agenda?
No, but it might be.
There's a copy right here.
Yeah, I put the public here.
I have the original bill.
Okay, go ahead.
so at the public hearing last year, before the town meeting, there was an issue raised that, that the ordinance was too vague about under what circumstances you had to get the residential building permit. So, for example, if you wanted to get solar-powered path lights or solar-powered porch lights or whatever, you didn't want to have to get a building permit. So we added language to one of the paragraphs of the ordinance that specifically says that anything below 100 or 1,000 watts power is not covered by the ordinance at all. So that would cover 1,000 watts is approximately what 2 large 3x6 solar panels can produce. So that's the proposed change. Anything below 1,000 watts does not count as a solar energy system that's covered by this ordinance.
Right. And that's what, at town meeting, that's what we were tasked to correct. People were worried that if they were going to, for example, in one of my buildings, I have solar panels, 2 little small solar panels on them that run lights inside. And they didn't want to get a permit for that. And that's what we were tasked with, and that's what the solar ordinance committee has come up with. Any comments, questions? Tom?
Yeah, who is on the solar committee? Who does it consist of?
I was.
Yep, Debbie,
Kemp, right?
Yeah.
Paul Kemp, Evan Holbrook, the roster, Robin Biskowski.
Oh,
Who else, Debbie?
there's another gentleman,
Paul Dundee.
Paul Dundee, but there's another gentleman who works in that industry.
Oh, yeah, let me find my roster. Is it Darren?
Yeah.
The name escapes me. I actually think he moved out of town, but, so that's,
So my question that follows is, I'm not sure what the qualifications of any of the committee are, but in the town meeting last year, if you go back to check the records, the statement was made, this does not apply to residential. And that is in fact false. That's not true. It was stated in the meeting that it does not apply to residential, but yet in the same sentence, I'm told, it doesn't apply to residential, but oh yes, you have to get a permit. Well, it's one or the other. And I'm sorry, double negative doesn't answer the question. It was stated clearly in the
But
town
all
meeting
you're
by the
required
select
to do
board.
if you put a residential unit on is to get a building permit, which takes 20 minutes or less.
No, the point of the matter is, it was stated in the town meeting last year by the select board that this ordinance will not apply to residential, but it was stated clearly in the ordinance that it does apply to residential because it requires a permit.
Who on the?
Well, what it says-
Who on the board made that
Well, so
statement?
what it-
I don't have the tapes, but you have the tapes of the meeting.
So what it
Right.
says under 1.3, it says solar systems shall require review and approval as follows. 1.3.7.1, residential, requires a building permit from the code enforcement officer. 1.3.7.2, commercial, and then this roof mounted, ground mounted industrial.
There's certainly a lot of the provisions of the ordinance that don't apply to residential, but the ordinance was designed to make sure that residential is at least mentioned so that there's no ambiguity about under what circumstances residential would be regulated.
And the question had come up at that meeting
Yeah,
about these really basic things that are pretty small. And the fear that they were covered,
Yeah,
that they would require permits, and we're trying to say they weren't, they don't.
right.
Well, the question was, does this apply to residential? The answer was no, it does not. But in the same sentence, it said, well, but you do have to get a permit. So a double negative in the same sentence suggests that something's not right. And what's not right is this is overreach by the guidance, and I'm sure this was a boilerplate, it was brought down from somewhere above in the state, is my guess. I don't know where it came from. But the point is, it was stated in the select board, or not by the select board, in the town meeting, that this does not apply to residential. And if you go back and check the videotapes, you'll find that.
But there were also copies of the ordinance at town meeting, right?
Well, that's what raised my question. I asked, does this apply to residential? Because it's an overreach on residential, because if you require a permit, then you're gonna have to go through all the applicability of getting a permit that requires, that's required in here under item 3. That's what is required for a permit.
So I have
I haven't read the ordinance, so I'm gonna ask a question here. The only time it mentions residential is the fact that it needs a permit.
Building permit.
Yeah.
All it needs is a building permit.
So I have a question for a former planning board person,
Yeah.
longer than me. Is there another, and so actually, maybe I should direct it at Debbie. Is there another ordinance in our rules that talks about, specifically about residential solar, about needing building permit? So this is the only place that it's mentioned.
Solar wasn't a thing when
Right.
the ordinance.
But I just didn't know whether it had been updated. Okay.
But any of the commercial ones, though, are gonna be treated just like they were in the general purpose. They're gonna go through site plan review, they're gonna go through the planning board. So, Tom, I'm not sure I understand what permit you're talking about. If you attach a solar array to your roof, you need a building permit. So what permit are you referring to?
That's what it says.
No, I know. But what I mean is, what is he referring to? You don't like the building permit part of it, or?
No, I'm saying that if you require a permit, then your permit applications under item 3 is what you need to go through to get a permit for your solar panels. And that basically is, I can understand it for a unit that's going to be on a roof that's applied to a commercial, what I consider a commercial application. It's done by a construction or solar company that's installing to connect you to the grid. I can understand why you need something for that. That application for residential, I can understand. But otherwise, residential, essentially off the grid, that's got solar panels for whatever, up to some point, I don't understand why this needs to apply, because it's not related to public safety. And the whole premise of this is public safety. So if public safety is concerned, why does it apply to a residential application that is not put in by a commercial outfit?
Well, that's a big question that was not part of what the committee was meant to undertake for this revision.
That's a weak answer. That should have been the intent of the committee. They should have covered all the bases under due diligence. They didn't do their due diligence, and they didn't get enough input.
Well,
I guess I don't, Tom, what is the problem with having to get a building permit? If you want to put a porch on your house that doesn't exist, you have to get a building permit to add the porch to your house. If you want to add another room to your house, you have to get a building permit. What's the big deal about getting a building permit to put solar up on your roof? I guess I don't understand your problem.
If you're not putting it on your roof, it doesn't have anything to do with safety. The homeowner is going to, at least they should do their due diligence, if they're going to apply solar anywhere in their premise. I have no problem with that, because the customer, or
But it's a structure.
the homeowner,
The ones I've seen in town that are not on a roof are on a structure, like the ones we have at the dump. They're on a structure.
right,
Anytime you build a structure,
Right.
you're supposed to get a building permit.
okay.
I guess I don't understand the problem.
Well, the problem is, the statement that was made in the town meeting that this did not apply to the residential was false, yet it was carried through anyway.
Do you remember who made that statement?
Yes, I believe it was the state representative.
I'll go back and look at the tape, I don't remember. I mean, I know the conversation came up. And what I meant, and.
I made it very clear in the meeting to be sure that this was on record. I restated that so that, okay, the select board indicated that this does not apply to residential. I just want to make a matter of record, and it should be on the videotape.
I will look at it again, I didn't see that the first time. What I do remember saying is that I shared some of the concerns that you and Todd both raised, and that we would spend the next year working on this, so.
Well,
The interesting part about residential is before the ordinance passed, so if you back up a year ago now, before town meeting, if you put a solar array on your roof, you went and got a building permit, because the town had issued building permits. So I guess I didn't see where that hasn't really changed any, you know what I mean? There's many towns issue building permits, and folks already have solar arrays in town, some have them, you know, on their roofs, and so the code officer had already issued building permits, so I guess I didn't see where.
So the building permit does it now require, you know, is it a checkoff or something about solar?
I thought it was a clarification, really, was what
That's what I
what I
thought,
saw
yeah.
was the ordinance just clarified
Yeah.
that those things just require only a building permit, so
And if I said-
and around sick, you know, many towns,
Yeah.
that's what they do, they do a building permit. This is before we passed this. This ordinance really was dealing with allowing, if you back up, it was allowing commercial solar array farms in a different zone, really.
Right.
They were already allowed in the general purpose zone because one got approved every year.
Right.
So the whole petition that the town dealt with and the ordinance that was created was to deal with allowing these.
Specifically, it was in a rural zone that people were
Right.
Exactly.
wanting to have
Which
that ability.
which the attorney in the town viewed as not being allowed because they were, I don't know, commercial.
You can't have commercial.
That's right.
It was
So
commercial.
that really was what the gist, and I'm not, you know, I mean, there's maybe words in there that are,
Well, if it had been continued to apply to commercial and industrial applications, not a problem. I mean, I can understand that necessity because those are usually higher power voltages and all that. But for residential, typical applications where I see you put up to 1,000 watts, is there any magic about the 1,000 watts versus, say, 2,000 or 5,000?
Well, the 1,000-watt thing was just to find sort of an arbitrary point that would definitely exclude small devices that you would go to Lowe's to buy to put in your front stoop or something. You know, small, self-powered things. That was the purpose of this change that's being proposed, is to make it crystal clear that small sort of toy devices like that aren't going to require a building permit.
and the fact of it is that we were issuing building permits for solar systems before this ordinance existed.
right.
So,
Both, yeah, right.
and so, you know, and again, this ordinance was designed, was started by people that own some land up, you know, hundreds of acres up in the north end of town that they used for absolutely nothing, and they wanted to be able to put it to use. As it turned out, they couldn't do it anyways, because they don't have access to, they don't have deeded access to the property, so.
Well, and I think you know, to add to that, and you're right, that was the original ordinance, and I think the concern was, and again, I'll go back and look at the tape, was that we made people who are just putting residential solar have to go through 9 pages, and it's like, no, they only need a building permit, but I will go back and check.
All right, if anybody has anything further, we'll continue with the public hearing. If not, this will be voted on at town meeting.